question 9. I call on the Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister for Health and Social Care what plans he has to review the eligibility criteria for Go Gold bus passes, what changes would be needed to implement different eligibility criteria, and whether he has undertaken an equality impact assessment of the current policy.
I call on the Minister for Health and Social Care to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And this is something that crosses over several departments. So an interdepartmental group was established prior to the COVID emergency period to review the current policy and to develop new regulations for concessionary bus fares, which includes gold bus passes. The work of this group has been delayed but will be reinitiated as it is seen as an urgent requirement. The Department of Health and Social Care will be supporting this work. An equality impact assessment was not carried out on the current policy, as it is recognised that the current concessionary bus fare scheme requires legislative amendment for equality compliance. The development work for the new regulations will be subject to an equality impact assessment. Enabling powers for the new regulations are contained in primary legislation that lie with the Department of Infrastructure.
Supplementary question, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. That's quite an interesting answer. I've been engaged with the Department of Infrastructure for some time on this particular issue. The response originally I had from the Minister was legislative change was required. Unfortunately, after delving into this a little bit, it turns out that's not strictly the case. And in fact, legislative change is not required. So it's very interesting to hear from the Minister for Health that he believes it is. The reason I'm asking the Minister for Health this question is because, according to the Department of Infrastructure, it is his department that authorises the Go Gold cards, which implies the policy decision sits internally within his department. So can he advise then on what basis he has been advised that legislative change is required in order to make commercial non-statutory concessions? Could he also advise why it is that a policy that sits within his department actually is now being reviewed by a cross-department working group instead of actually just being done internally by a decision that he himself could make as a minister?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The advice that I've had is that the enabling powers for concessionary bus fare schemes are actually quoted in the Department of Infrastructure primary legislation, and that the Department of Infrastructure may make concessionary travel schemes for the provision of travel concessions to eligible persons travelling on eligible services. This is under the Concessionary Travel Schemes Act 2016, but it requires secondary legislation progressing as a result. My understanding is that the department does actually approve the applications. The Honourable Member for Ramsey is quite correct on that, and that's why it needs to be cross-departmental. Can I thank the Honourable Member for bringing this question to the House, because I'll be quite frank, it's not something that's really crossed my desk as such before, but it is something that I want to see move forward, because there clearly is an equality impact here that hasn't been addressed.
Question, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister agree, as the Minister who took forward the Disability Discrimination Act and then subsequently was instrumental in the Equality Act, that it would be helpful and probably useful and probably necessary for his department to assure themselves about the equality screening and the equality impact assessment that the Department of Infrastructure has done in respect to this matter?
Minister,
Most definitely, Mr Speaker. Happy to agree with the Honourable Member for Douglas Central.
Supplementary question, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for committing to reviewing this policy. That's more progress than I've made with infrastructure in a matter of months. The specific question that I have for the Minister is in terms of the difference between Go Silver and Go Gold bus passes, in that the Go Gold pass, which is the disability concession, allows for the individual's carer to travel with them for free, which the Silver pass does not. It seems rather arbitrary to say, actually, when you reach a certain age, irrespective of your condition and whether you need continuous care or not, that you're no longer eligible for a Go Silver Pass beyond the age of 65. So as part of his review of the policy, will the Minister commit to having a look at whether or not it would make sense to extend the disability concession for carers to travel alongside their individuals in terms of those in receipt of attendance allowance as well as a disability living allowance?
Minister to reply. Thank
you, Mr Speaker. Obviously, like I say, the concessionary schemes rest with DOI as well, so it's important we do this cross-governmental, but certainly I find very little to argue with in what the Honourable Member's just said. Obviously the Go Gold at the moment, as soon as you hit an arbitrary age, as the Honourable Member said, switches to the Go Silver, so I'm happy to give the pledge that should all be looked at as part of this.
Supplementary question, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the oversight about the Equality Act and mobility devices, which happened 3 times in 3 successive pieces of education, does the Minister think it would be a good idea to check the Concessionary Travel Schemes Act 2016, which is just announced, to make sure it's enforced, and it's actually been introduced into the legislation. It was taken through just before the last general election, and would the Minister come back to this court to make sure that that's actually in the statute book?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to take away that and check it.
Please like and subscribe to the Isle of Man TV channel. Thank you.